today we're going to be talking about the trusted COVID-19 essential supplies repository, which is actually right now in a stage of the open call for data contributions. And we hope to attract enough people to submit data sets as the project title reads, about the essential supplies that is needed right now for the treatment of one of the biggest threats in the history of a modern human race. And it's actually been a week since I was tested positive for COVID-19 disease. Luckily, I've been doing good, but there are not a lot of people who actually get the disease that are feeling the way as good as I am right now. And it was when I got tested, it was great to see that at least in the hospital, I got my test done. They had all the necessary equipment to protect the personnel that is there to cure people, that is there to perform tests on patients. And it seems that with the second wave of the coronavirus disease, we are doing slightly better than as compared with the first wave. That said, situation is far from ideal. We need to improve the access to information for humanitarian organizations, for governments, as they are procuring the essential equipment to treat coronavirus patients, to prevent disease. And we at OriginTrail have decided that we are going to help put all the necessary information for governments, for hospitals, for humanitarian organizations to make better decisions when they're deciding on which equipment to buy, which vendor to select. And with the first wave, at least in our countries, in Slovenia and Serbia, and specifically in Slovenia, if we go to the second slide, there have been several scandals with regards to the purchasing, with regards to the procurement of medical equipment, and more specifically to personal protective equipment. As you see, plenty of vendors submitted very kind of sketchy offers to the government, which eventually ended up purchasing fraudulent equipment, and sometimes they actually managed to purchase equipment that was intended for the treatment of COVID-19 patients. So in that cases, personal protective equipment should have been the one that is capable to filter out the most dangerous particles. And in specific cases, the personal equipment that was purchased did not have all the required certification, so that the bottom line was it was not useful for the treatment of patients. And in order to avoid those scandals in the future, and in order to give hospitals and governments better access to knowledge, we decided to utilize our OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph and make the decentralized knowledge graph available for something good. And in this open call, we are going to be discussing 9 steps that are required for anyone that decides to join the campaign, the campaign as a data contributor. So if we go to the next slide, from here on, Branimir and I will try to shed light on which are those 9 steps, all the way from registering your interest and up until the point when you have submitted the useful data sets, and you qualify also to receive certain awards in TRAC token. Branimir, would you take the first step and then also explain the following steps with regards to the data structuring?
Yes, absolutely. I would just like to add upon what you already explained really well, is from the technical side of things, what we're really looking at here is a sort of a unique data crowdsourcing campaign. So we're looking at how can we, in a joint way, gather all the possible necessary information that we can to demonstrate that that all these things can be actually queried from one single point and be open in that sense, that everyone can actually find the necessary information regarding the personal protective equipment or generally essential supplies. And that's where the knowledge graph Žiga mentioned is quite powerful. So in that sense, everyone who contributes in this campaign will actually directly contribute to the knowledge graph itself. And that means that essentially, to put it simply, the more data we all get together, the more powerful and the more knowledge will this whole repository contain, and thus be more useful. So we've actually outlined the 9 steps here today, and we'll try to shed light on how it works. They're quite simple, let's say, but it actually, with joint effort, we're able to create this in this very elaborate knowledge repository, really, because it actually requires quite some work to get it done, and we'll see what that is. So basically, to start, in order to actually get into the whole campaign, we have started with a very simple form, an application form that anyone who wants to apply to be part of this data crowdsourcing campaign, essentially, as a data contributor, should fill in. There's a certain limit of 30 contributors at this stage, where we want to basically that we want to onboard and in a way provide the necessary tools to actually join into this campaign. And so basically, once if you're interested, once you fill out this form, based on the applications, up to 30 selected data contributors get confirmed, and they get to be part of the campaign. And once they actually get to be part of the campaign, what they get to do is actually have sort of a pre-access to the network operating system with an account that was built for actually this application itself. So for the trusted COVID-19 essential supplies repository. So essentially, that means that anyone who applies would get login credentials for the NOS and a certain amount of credits. Now, for those who don't know about credits, the credits are essentially a system with which the NOS helps companies abstract the underlying complexities of handling cryptocurrencies when working with technologies such as DLTs. But not necessarily just DLTs, but essentially in this case, the credits would be the units of measurement denominated in dollars that the companies see and that they can actually utilize for their own purposes, for example, to put on their balance sheet, because it's really hard or sometimes impossible to actually have crypto on a company's balance sheet, depending on the local legal framework. But essentially, everyone can handle dollars. So that's why, that's the whole mission of the network operating system, is to have companies use it as a platform, just as they use other platforms, and abstract all the other necessary complexities underneath. So using the powers of the network operating system, everyone who will be part of this campaign will actually contribute through it to the trusted COVID-19 essential supplies repository. Going further, the users will need to actually, in order to get into the pool for the rewards that we wish to give out for anyone participating, they would need to provide their Ethereum wallet, essentially, to receive the trace rewards. This is also important because of the actual identification of the data sets. So in that sense, there will be a signature provided with the wallet to the actual data that's being submitted. But most importantly, it's for us to be able to actually reward the best contributors in this campaign. So that's step number 3, pretty simple. You just add your wallet in. And then we get to the actual gist of it. So the main sort of step is step 4, which essentially is the task. So the task starts with actually reviewing the World Health Organization list of relevant products. And this has been provided by the World Health Organization already. It's available for a while already, actually. And it's also available in the NOS. So anyone can download it and can go through this list and figure out what is the important data that needs to be collected on these specific products. Essentially, it's a list of relevant things that any contributor can look for. So essentially, that's kind of a starting point. And what do we specifically look for? Well, that's also part of step 4. So the idea is to make this campaign as easy as possible. So in that sense, our team will be providing an Excel template data set that actually can be uploaded to the analyst. So anyone who's contributing, reviewing the WHO list, will be then able to download a template data set, which looks pretty much like this, the one on this slide, where essentially anyone will be able to populate data they find online into these distinct columns. And there's certain things that need to be followed through, which I'll explain a bit further. But essentially, what I'm trying to really come across here is that in terms of specific knowledge, I know some people have been worried if they will need to know advanced big data pipeline skills or data science skills. Essentially, data science skills won't hurt, but they're not needed. So anyone with some powerful data science skills might be able to do things faster, or create a larger data set easier than someone who doesn't have these skills. But even doing things manually is possible, and sometimes can prove even better because of the additional human review of the whole process. So what we're looking at here is really an Excel spreadsheet, but that's not the only format that's available. So there's the ability for users who can, who have the powers I mentioned just now with working with JSON, working with any sort of data processing tools that you might know, like for example, you're a Python developer and you're good with data analytics. If that's your thing, then perfect. You can go ahead, produce an OT-JSON linked data file from the scratch. But for those who cannot or don't have the skills, they can also use this Excel spreadsheet. And what's important to say here is that this spreadsheet, or basically any data set that gets submitted, has 2 sort of main groups of data. And then there's this basic product information, which is here the columns in this example data set sort of on the left. And then there's the additional information highlighted in yellow, which is sort of on the right. So the basic product information is intended to be filled out completely. And that's basic information like the GTIN, basically barcode of certain product, what is the manufacturer, the country of origin, the website, a product name, of course. And basically this basic type of what we're looking for. So that's something that is required, and this information is needed to get started with in order to have sort of the initial minimum value from this product. And any additional information added on the right can be actually custom information. And what I'm specifically thinking of here is information that can be structured according to GS1 web vocabulary and schema.org schemas. and specifically because these are compatible with the GS1 Smart Search implementation of standard. So essentially the idea there is that when we structure this information, we need to introduce semantics to it so that it is understandable by both machines and humans. So some of you might be familiar with this. For those of you who are not, these are actually quite commonly used on the web. Schema.org, for example, is a very common resource being utilized on websites such as the online web stores, like for example, Amazon or Facebook web stores. They actually utilize these standardized structured schema descriptions of certain things, like for example, products. It explains on how you sort of set a product price, for example, for a web shop and so forth. And GS1 web vocabulary is basically a very similar thing because there's quite a lot of things that are overlapping between the two. So schema.org and web vocabulary are, in that case, sort of brothers and sisters, sorry, in that sense. So why is this important? Well, if I go back to the previous slide, basically any additional information that would make sense would provide essentially more relevant data for this product, but it's important that we properly introduce structure to it. So that means introduce the right semantics according to the right standards. So anyone willing to participate will, if you would like to add some additional information, you should look into the links that are provided on this slide. It's nothing really super complicated. It's really just about how we name things and then how we look for them. And once again, it's not the minimum requirement. So the minimum requirement would be to add at least those basic information that was provided on the left. So that's in short. Just to recap, step number 4: get the list of WHO essential products for the COVID pandemic. Find relevant information online and either fill it into the Excel template or produce, if you can, a JSON file. And if you can add additional information, then make sure you follow the resources on the slide, which are GS1 web vocabulary, schema.org, and basically that's it. The GS1 Smart Search explains how these work together in a linked data scenario. All right, so let's say you've created this data set, you collected a lot of useful information, and then you proceed to the next step. So once you have created the data set, you would submit it to the network operating system through your account. And once the network operating system gets the data set, it's able to check the structure and parse the data inside to finally produce an ODN-ready data set that can be actually published on the network. What will this specifically mean? Well, if there's the information in the data set needs to be structured properly. So if it's not structured properly, it won't be useful information. So if it's just, let's say, rubbish information in the data set, it won't pass these checks. Once this the step 5 has been completed and we have an ODN-ready data set, further along the next step basically is to publish this data set into the data creator node that Trace Labs will provide for this campaign. So all the data sets collected will be signed by the wallets that contributors provide, created into the verifiable credential format data sets that will be published on the ODN, and they will be securely transferred to the Trace Labs node, which then for each of the submissions will actually publish the relevant public information and proofs on the ODN, and for that subtract an amount of credits from the account that has been assigned to the data contributor in the start of the campaign. All right, step 7 is that all the data set that get submitted will actually be reviewed by our team. So we want to make sure that even though we have automatic checks that all the data is relevant, and we also want to see in terms of the not only of the quality of the data and the quantity of the data, but specifically the knowledge and the uniqueness of the data and who has submitted the most of this information. So in order to assess so how much of the new knowledge has been added to the graph. That means literally how many new additional graph elements, vertices and edges will be created with each new data set, which would be basically, this will be the base for the reward. And that means that the more additional data means more graph elements. So that would essentially be, for example, either more products in the data set, or not necessarily have to have more products, but more information on a certain product in that additional data fields that we've seen in the data set. So that's essentially the more the knowledge, the more additional graph elements, the bigger the chance for the reward. And then finally, step 9, the best contributors will get rewarded in trace tokens for their contributions. So essentially, once all this data gets collected and reviewed, we will award the tokens, and then finally enable the open access for all the data in the repository via the application built on top of the analyze. So those are 9 steps. I will quickly show the important dates. Essentially, we are looking at today as the webinar day, so that's also part of the important dates list, August 14th. The next important date is September 11th, where we will start onboarding the first contributors. So the actual process, the specific process that we've discussed here will be explained again in detail, and the actual files will be provided within the NOS accounts, for which the application will be launched on September the 17th. And that's, at the moment, is a tentative date, but essentially it's mid-September that we're targeting to launch the application. And then 2 weeks after, there's a 2 weeks period up until October 2nd, during which data contributions will be possible. And then finally, about a certain period after, so about 2 weeks after, once we have reviewed and assessed all the information that has been provided, we will announce the rewards, and we will enable the data access to everyone, basically. So it will be an open access application to the actual information that has been collected. So that's basically it in terms of all the necessary details around the campaign.
We have 2 questions though. Not sure, Branimir, if you can see them. We have 2 questions from Dustin. So the first question, for dataset validation, is there a tool we can use to verify before submitting to the NOS? If no, is this validation code available on GitHub? That's the first question. You might want to take this one before we go to the next one.
Yeah, let me read that once again. Data validation, is there a tool can use to verify before submitting to NOS? If no, the validation code. Yes, so essentially the validation will be performed within the NOS. So you can submit the file to the NOS, and the validation script will run, and will actually let you know if there's an error or not. For specifically validating the schema information, I will just revert back to the links. So if, for example, for schema.org, I can actually open that one. The available schemas, for example, the product schema, is something that you can review here, and there are tools to independent tools not built by our team, where you can actually sort of validate that the specific JSON file schema has been is created properly. So I encourage everyone to take a look at these specific resources here. and basically there's already available tools that will be there to validate that certain naming is all right according to the schema. All right, so there was another question, I think, for OT-JSON folks, is there a JSON schema? Yeah, essentially for OT-JSON folks, that's a good question. OT-JSON is documented fairly well on the official documentation website for the OriginTrail project. And to quickly explain, OT-JSON is a canonical format, essentially providing a very high level ability to sort of connect different graph elements and to be an abstraction layer between different abilities, sort of to connect to different graph databases. But essentially, within the OT-JSON, one can fit in, and one does fit in a JSON LD file. So essentially, whatever you, whatever valid JSON and valid JSON LD one can produce, that will be that will fit into the OT-JSON nicely without any issues. But for anyone who would like to see more information on the OT-JSON, you can go ahead to the official documentation, which is docs.origintrail.io, and that's explained fairly nicely there. We will also be sharing this presentation after the webinar, so everyone can actually go ahead and look at these links. If I were to click on some more here, this is basically going to take you to the GS1 web vocabulary website, which basically contains all the potential properties. Like if you open this list, you will see a very long list of properties, but these are possible, for example, properties. Like one of the interesting ones is GS1 pip, for example, which is the product information page. And if you go inside here, it explains in detail how this works. So what it essentially means, and this is tied to which specific class. And as you can see, it's tied to both schema and GS1 classes. And it's because it's sort of designed to work together pretty well with schema.org. Depending on different products, that might not be useful in all cases. But for example, allergen information is something that's interesting. So if there's a certain product that might have allergic components, that would be super useful to see in the data set. Certification information as well. So additional EPCS information also, though I do not expect anyone to be able to submit that. That's something that really is in the realm of companies knowing this information. But you know, anything goes really. Anything will be can potentially be part of this data set. So I encourage once again everyone to go through the resources and get to know a bit more what kind of data would be useful. Maybe one more thing we didn't mention what during this video is really where is the data available? And the answer to that is really that there's, and this is sort of the whole problem, is the data is available sort of all over the place. You can find it on various websites of manufacturers, vendors, and that is the key thing. It's not available in sort of one place. Even if you look into Google or some sort of places that sort of do enterprise data mapping, it's very hard to find high quality structured information in one place where you can actually search for something and get this result. So that's what we're trying to demonstrate here, really, is to get all this information, structure it together. It's going to take some crunching, but that's why we as a community together we can do quite a lot, because we can cover a lot of ground, and then discovering this data really can be from any sort of these data sources. It's important though to indicate this data source. So one of the key elements of the basic product information is actually the data source URL. So we would like to always have the ability for someone to discover the data, from discovering the data to actually go and see where the data has originated from, to make sure that that there is a valid source.
I think we can wrap it up here. Just wanted to say once again that you're all welcome to participate in the whitelisting process. As you heard, Branimir told you that we have 30 spots available, and we are going to be somewhat selective, but I think that we have still nonetheless plenty of spots available, and that we can work with a bigger number of interesting candidates. Now, it's not only about receiving the awards at the end of the day after you have submitted the eligible data sets. It's also about the knowledge that you get throughout this process, and the knowledge of semantic web, the knowledge of linked data is something that is next to the blockchain skill, something that is going to be very much required in the future economy. And we aim to be the ones who are going to be at the forefront of the future economy, and we want to bring as many of you guys with us. And it seems that we are going to have a very, very fun time trying to collect as much useful data as possible, and hopefully gaining some new knowledge out of it. And Branimir is going to be with all the candidates, with all those that are going to be selected within the whitelisting process, guiding you guys through the entire process. So we expect that a lot can be taken from this entire process. And Branimir, kudos for this webinar. You did a really, really good job. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Žiga. And yeah, we have one more question in the Q&A. It's by Melvin. He asks, how do we verify that the products are legit and that participants do not just import as much data as possible? Yeah, so that's a very good question. There's actually there's two questions. So let's start with the second one. So the participants overloading data sets with just random information. That's from that angle, there's two things to do there. So one thing is that there will be certain limits towards the amount of data that's being published. So we're not just looking at the amount of someone publishing a gigabyte. It's really about because we're not looking for data in terms of kilos. We're looking for data in terms of knowledge, and that's why we're focusing specifically on how much elements this will add to the graph. What kind of elements? Well, there's certain automatic checks that will be done, so that will detect if the data is rubbish or not. Let's say that at the beginning, but even that's kind of the biggest reason why we actually have this limit in terms of how many contributors can be part of the campaign, is that the team will also review this information. So we, in a way, all the data sets that get collected will be both reviewed by both machines and people at the same time. So that's in a way how we make sure that the data is legit. That's why we also need to see the source of the data, so that not anyone just turns on what was the name of the latest AI algorithm, the LPT3, right? The one that can invent text. So we don't necessarily want to see that. We really want to see data that can be checked, and that's one of the reasons why it's not 30,000 contributors that we're looking for. In terms of how do we verify that the products are legit, so in that sense, it's really important to have a very good data source, so that we can actually, for example, take the data from the manufacturer's website, or, for example, data from a certification body website. We as a team collaborate with our partners from BSI who actually work on that. So their job is, in a way, or their partners, is to actually perform these sort of on-the-ground, real-world checks rather than checks on the data. So in that sense, such data sources should be the preferred ones that will get into the data, the repository. So, but in terms of us as a community going out and sort of somehow verifying this on the spot, that's something that that we obviously don't have the capacity to do. What we can do, though, is verify that the data is available on a trusted or to a degree trusted source, structure this data, collect it together, and give it a label in that sense of where it has also come from. So with this level of integrity and the additional immutability of the data collected, this can be a repository that anyone can review this information and then decide upon if they want to trust it or not. So in that sense, you know, trust the actual issuer of the information. That's why we also are looking in for signatures by actual wallets, so that anyone who's participating is also signing this information in that sense that we can track, we can see who has provided which information.
So it all starts with a quality source, and in the past month, I believe we had CDC, what's the full name? I think it's American U.S. Center for Disease Control, right?
Mm-hmm.
The CDC. They published a list of certified suppliers of not only personal protective equipment, but also some other essentials on their website. We are definitely going to be providing all the links that we are going to find throughout the process, and all candidates are of course warmly welcome to perhaps create a common Google Doc and share links amongst themselves. So it you know, it all starts with a quality data source, and if something is made by, let's say, CDC or FDA as a valuable repository, valuable list, then such a source is definitely you know, a legitimate source and can be used used in a good way also for this campaign. Dustin, can you tell us how this data is going to be consumed and who will be using it? Depending on how good the data will be, we will also decide on what type of users to attract to consume this data. As we initially pointed out, it's going to be used and made useful for governments, for hospitals, and on the other side, we also aim to involve their certification bodies. The standards that we would also like to use here, actually the data modules, are the ones of the W3C consortium, especially the verifiable credential. And when using verifiable credential models, we have at least 3 different parties using such data repository. First one being the verifier of the data. That could be the government, could be it could be a hospital. On the other side, we have an issuer of such a verifiable credential, which is a certification body, which would be awarding certification for a specific, let's say, an item or to a specific factory manufacturer. And we also have a verifiable credentials holder, which, as you may have guessed it already, it is a manufacturer or a vendor for such equipment. So the data, the information is going to be consumed by an ecosystem of different users, and the main point here being that we need to create a trusted repository that is not based on a centralized solution, and that we know who is responsible both for data input, and those who are reading out of such repository actually know that data is both coming from an authoritative source, and that it has been verified by an organization that has all the required information about specific items, specific factory. Another question, or Branimir, I'm sorry, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think we can move to the next one.
So Melvin is asking us, are there any rules for the data that can be submitted For instance, is a supplier that only delivers to a certain country welcome? Yes. So is a supplier that only delivers to a certain country welcome? Definitely.
Really, the way I understand the question is a bit different, so that we essentially do not want to restrict information. So if a certain, if a certain supplier is only delivering to the US, that should not disqualify them. So they're qualified to be part of like this whole data repository. So anyone really. Ideally, we get the information that's most useful for a wide sort of group of people. So some, let's say, big manufacturers that supply multiple continents with equipment, but that's not to say that something that's like a smaller manufacturer, let's say here in Europe, should be disregarded. So we don't see this as being sort of a disqualifying factor or some sort of lower quality of information thing that would influence the sort of the results of this campaign. That's at least how I understood it. So what's really important here is we start on this whole campaign together with the intention of actually understanding that if we get a lot of information together, and if we don't get it together properly, structure it properly, give it enough semantics and link it together, then it's just going to be a bunch of sort of a pile of information that's really hard to go through. So that's why we focus this whole discussion a lot on the standards and semantics, because sometimes it's even better to have less information, but if you can sift through it very easily, search through it, run algorithms on it potentially, that is going to prove, that can prove to be much more valuable than to have a lot of information that's kind of hard to go through. And at this moment, there's not a single pot where you can sort of look into and find a bunch of this information connected. So we want to start with that, and the trusted repository, and that's something we might not have said, will continue to live on. So this is the first iteration that we want to jumpstart the project, actually learn from it as well, to get your feedback too on what you found hard, or what was sort of a good tool that was used. Not just the tools that we as Trace Labs will provide, but maybe there will be some additional tools that you guys discovered during the process. So all these learnings will be very valuable going forward with the Trusted COVID Essential Supplies Repository, because in potential next waves of such data crowdsourcing, we could potentially utilize those as well. And but the key thing is that we build a good foundation. The good foundation will be sort of a good mechanism to collaborate together, tools in the NOS that we can use, and that's why we're providing such tools in terms of to ease up the collection of data. And then finally, that we all together pay attention that we have the data structured in the right way. Without that, it's kind of like, it will be kind of like me speaking Serbian now to an international audience. Only some people will be able to understand. But luckily I can speak English, so we have the proper structure to the words and thoughts, at least. I hope it's proper. I hope I didn't bore you guys. So yeah, that's kind of the analogy to that. We need to provide the right semantics to the data, and that's what's the focus really. Okay, I feel like I spoke too long and bored people to death, so I'm shutting down. And
I think we managed to cover everything. I think we are very much on time. Yeah, okay. So whether you are spending your time right now in quarantine or being able to move freely around the country, let us know if you have any other questions. We are, as always, available on Telegram and in Discord as well. And do not forget about the open office hours we are going to be having on Monday. I believe 6 p.m. Central European time. And if you have any question with regards to this webinar or any other question with regards to the roadmap, we are going to have those ones covered on Monday. So without further ado, Branimir and I are now saying goodbye and wishing you all a very nice weekend. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Bye, everyone.